Okay, so here's the deal with the rocks under pressure experiment. It was one of the first crazy ideas I came up with. Mrs. Ritson didn't know what to do with me back then because I was always trying to come up with new ways to make rocks a little bit more exciting. So we decided to make up this mix for all 3 science classes, and we made up the rocks separately back then because we were all split up. Made up about 100 of these little guys, and we decided to try and test not just heat but pressure. So the kids wanted to know whether putting them under pressure would actually cause them to actually get harder. That was the big question. So how on earth do we do that? Well, you see, back then I didn't have access to the arts department's kiln, so I came up with the idea to take them home and cook them myself over the weekend. Hence, we took all these lovely little rocks back to my house. And the problem was, number one, I actually put sugar in the mix back then when we were making up the rocks, so we actually had caramelizing smell in my house for weeks after this. My husband will never forget it. But we took the rocks home and we decided to bake them. Now I couldn't fit them all on the stove in the same places, so I put some of them in here in the bottom of the stove, but I couldn't put any pressure on top of those guys because I couldn't fit bricks in as well. So those guys ended up not having any pressure whatsoever on them while they baked. Then I put a whole heap on top of the stove like this. And what I did was I put a great big board over the top of them, and then I put on top of that board a whole heap of bricks to try and weigh them down. Now, they stayed there for the first 24 hours, and then I needed to cook something, so half of them ended up being taken off the stove, like this, and the rest were left on the stove for the rest of the weekend. In the end, what I ended up with was this. I had some rocks that had actually been put in the stove itself, so they had no pressure. And then I had some rocks that had been put on the stove but taken off after a day, so they had 24 hours of pressure while they cooked. And then I had some rocks that ended up staying there the entire weekend, so essentially they were being cooked for 48 hours under pressure with all of the bricks on top of it. So we ended up with 3 different groups that we then went and did our smash tests and our scratch tests with.